Douglas Glenn Colvin was born on September 18, 1951 in Fort Lee, Virginia. He was the son of an American soldier and a German woman. As an infant, his family relocated to Berlin due to his father's military service. Colvin described his childhood as lonely, as his family relocated quite frequently. His parents separated during his early teens, and he remained in Berlin until the age of 15, when he, along with his mother and sister, moved to Forest Hills, New York. That's where Colvin would meet John Cummings and Thomas Erdely, then playing in a band called the Tangerine Puppets, named after a Donovan song. The three decided to start a new band, bringing in their friend Jeffrey Hyman, who at the time was the drummer of local band Sniper. It was Colvin who suggested they call their new band the Ramones, after reading that Paul McCartney often signed into hotels under the alias Paul Ramone. Douglas Colvin would become Dee Dee Ramone. John Cummings would become Johnny Ramone. Thomas Erdely would become Tommy Ramone. And Jeffrey Hyman would become Joey Ramone. Dee Dee was initially the band's lead vocalist, but decided to focus on bass guitar when it became apparent he had difficulty playing bass and singing at the same time, though he did provide vocals on a few Ramone songs. While all songwriting credit went to the Ramones, Dee Dee was actually the band's most prolific songwriter, penning many of their best-known songs, such as Commando, Rockaway Beach, Bonzo Goes to Bitburg, and 53rd and 3rd, which is about Dee Dee's days as a street hustler in New York City. Dee Dee struggled with drug addiction for much of his life, particularly heroin. He began using drugs as a teen and continued to use for the majority of his adult life. Dee Dee was the Ramones' original bassist from 1974 until 1989, playing on 11 studio albums, but he wanted to branch out. And so he left the Ramones to pursue a short-lived career in hip-hop, taking on the moniker Dee Dee King.
Alarm clock ringing, it's time to get up. It's time to do that funky strut. I'm a funky man, I got funky bones. I'm a funky man, my name is Dee Dee Ramone. Well, let me tell you a little about myself. I play the bass in a punk rock band. Been all over the world, even to Japan. And nothing can surprise me, man. I seen it all, I had a ball. Someone should make a Dee Dee double, alright. My funky guy. Well, alright. My funky guy.
When Schoolie D came out with that album, and he would say, "What time is it?" And it's Gucci time, you know. I understood that. It's rising above oppression, you know. A Negro being able to buy a Gucci watch. Great, you know. I'm a Negro too. I felt the same excitement when I could buy a Gucci watch and spend a lot of money, like an outlaw. I don't think it was worth fighting over. It wasn't so good anyway, the album, you know. I couldn't do rap. I was trying. I don't know how. I'm not good enough to know. I'm not a Negro or something. I don't know what it is. I just can't do it. I wanted to.
Called one of the worst recordings of all time by music critic Matt Carlson, the album was a commercial and critical flop. In an article for The Village Voice, Chaz Kangas wrote that the album sounded less like a rap record and more like a Ramones album that has rapping on it. Though there were a few highlights, non-rap song The Crusher would eventually be re-recorded by the Ramones.
Now I wanna wrestle in the garden. I'm on my way to stardom. I know I'm ready, I know I'm great. But first I've got to get in shape, cause I got my eye rushing down to the cherry mud. I swear this guy thinks he can check me and never check his blood. Now they have a shot. Get out of the ring. Shot. Get out of the ring. Shot. Get out of the ring. Shot. Get out of the ring.
In 1991, Dee Dee was briefly involved with controversial punk rocker G.G. Allin, playing guitar with Allin's backup band, the Murder Junkies. He was in the band for only a week, but it was long enough for him to be interviewed during the filming of Todd Phillips' G.G. Allin documentary, Hated. He didn't seem to know much about the band he was joining.
What made you decide to join the Murder Junkies?
So that's the name. I didn't know that was the name of Murder Junkies. I thought it was the G.G. Allen band. And I joined it because I wanted to have some fun and play a little and not have any responsibility.
We had been drinking heavily, and as we drove down 9th Avenue, Gigi opened up the van door and began throwing beer bottles at some hookers. I wasn't worried because I knew at 30 miles an hour he was too drunk to hit anything, let alone a prostitute. 1 week later, Dee Dee quit the band, claiming it had nothing to do with that incident.
In 1992, Dee Dee formed another short-lived project called Dee Dee Ramone and the Chinese Dragons. That band was followed by the most successful project of his Post-Ramones career, a group called Dee Dee Ramone ICLC, which lasted from 1994 to 1996. The band broke up before they could record their second album, but some of the songs intended for that album ended up being recorded by the Ramones on their final album, Adios Amigos. The song Born to Die in Berlin would be the final song on the final Ramones album and featured Dee Dee singing in German over the bridge. Dee Dee would continue to write music, releasing multiple solo albums. On March 18, 2002, the Ramones were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which honored Dee Dee, Johnny, Joey, Tommy, and replacement drummer Marky. The ceremony was one of Dee Dee's last public appearances, as he was found dead on June 5, 2002, from a heroin overdose.
Hi, I'm Dee Dee Ramone, and I'd like to congratulate myself and thank myself and give myself a big pat on the back. Thank you, Dee Dee. You're very wonderful. I love you. Thank you.
Dee Dee Ramone is buried at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery in Hollywood, not far from his former bandmate Johnny Ramone. His headstone features the Ramones seal, and at the stone's base is the line, "Okay, I gotta go now."